I watched my son stand at the altar in his wedding suit, waiting for a bride who was never coming. Not because she got cold feet. Not because of some romantic misunderstanding. But because I had her arrested 30 minutes before the ceremony. You think I'm a monster? Let me tell you what I discovered 3 months before that wedding. Before we continue, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. And let us know where in the world you're watching from in the comments. Now, back to my story. I'm Eleanor Hartwell, 63 years old, and for 35 years I've been an estate lawyer specializing in protecting vulnerable clients from predators. I've seen every con, every manipulation, every pretty lie designed to separate good people from their money. So when my son brought home his dream girl 6 months after burying his father, I should have known better. I should have seen it coming. But grief makes fools of us all, doesn't it? Even the ones who know better. It was a Tuesday evening in late September when Daniel first mentioned her name. My son, 35 years old, had been a ghost for months after losing his father to a sudden heart attack. Richard and I had been married for 38 years, and watching him die in that hospital room had shattered something fundamental in both of us. Daniel stopped returning calls. He moved through life like he was underwater. His architecture firm started losing clients because he couldn't focus. As a mother, I would have given anything to see light return to his eyes. So when he called me that Tuesday, voice bright with something I hadn't heard since the funeral, I cried with relief before he even told me why. "Mom, I met someone," he said, and I could hear the smile. "Her name is Sophia. She's a trauma therapist. We met at the grief support group Dr. Morrison recommended. A therapist who met clients at their most vulnerable. The irony would have been poetic if it wasn't so perfectly calculated. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was my boy sounded alive again. I'd love to meet her, I told him, already planning the dinner in my head. That Friday night, Daniel brought Sophia Hearns to my home. I remember opening the door and seeing her for the first time, this delicate creature with luminous dark eyes and a smile that could melt glaciers. She wore a simple cream dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, though I didn't register that detail until much later. Her handshake was soft, her voice even softer. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said, and those eyes glistened with what I took for genuine emotion. "Daniel has told me so much about you and your late husband. I'm so deeply sorry for your loss." She said it like she meant it. Like she understood. And maybe that's what made me lower my guard, because I wanted so desperately to believe that someone understood my son's pain well enough to help him heal. Over dinner, Sophia told us her story, and it was heartbreaking. An only child, she'd lost both parents in a car accident 4 years earlier. No siblings. No extended family willing to take her in. She'd put herself through graduate school, became a therapist specializing in grief counseling, and dedicated her life to helping others avoid the isolation she'd experienced. "Sometimes I think I became a therapist just to have a family again," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "My clients, they become like family to me. Especially the ones who understand what it's like to lose everything." Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. The way he looked at her, like she'd hung the moon specifically for him, should have warned me. Love that intense, that fast, rarely grows from healthy soil. But I was a grieving widow watching my grieving son smile for the first time in 6 months. I wanted to believe in miracles. After dinner, Sophia helped me clear the dishes despite my protests. In the kitchen, she showed me photos on her phone. Her parents, she said, on their last vacation together before the accident. I looked at the images of a smiling couple on a beach somewhere tropical, and I felt my heart break for this young woman who'd lost so much. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known in that moment, was that I was looking at stock photography. The kind you can purchase for $20 on any photo website. The kind that show up in picture frames at department stores. But Sophia had chosen them carefully, edited them just enough to look authentic, and spun a story around them that would make anyone with a heart want to gather her up and promise her she'd never be alone again. And that's exactly what I did. 3 weeks later, Daniel called me at my office, voice trembling with joy. "Mom, I proposed." She said yes. 3 weeks. My son had known this woman for less than a month, and they were engaged. Every professional instinct I had screamed at me to pump the brakes, to suggest a longer engagement, to recommend premarital counseling. But the personal part of me, the mother who'd watched her son suffer, heard only his happiness. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I heard myself say. "Have you set a date?" "Actually, we were thinking spring. Maybe April?" Sophia's always dreamed of a spring wedding. 6 months from proposal to wedding. Red flag number 1, though I filed it away without really examining it. The wedding planning started immediately, and it was there that I first glimpsed the calculating mind behind those tearful eyes. Sophia wanted everything, and she wanted it big. The venue had to be Riverside Estate, a converted mansion in the countryside that cost more per hour than most people's monthly salary. The dress had to come from a specific designer who'd recently dressed a celebrity bride. The flowers had to be imported peonies, even though they'd cost 3 times the price of domestic blooms. "I know it seems extravagant," Sophia said during one of our planning meetings, her hand finding mine across the table at the wedding planner's office. "But I've always dreamed of this day. When you don't have family to celebrate with, the wedding becomes even more important. It's not just about Daniel and me. It's about finally having a family again. About belonging somewhere. How do you say no to that? How do you tell a woman who lost everyone that her dreams are too expensive? You don't. At least I didn't. Instead, I opened my checkbook and started writing. The venue deposit, $50,000. The dress, $40,000. The catering alone would run $30,000 for 200 guests. "Eleanor, this is too generous," Sophia protested, but I noticed she never actually refused any payment. "You've already done so much." "You're going to be my daughter," I told her, believing every word. This is what family does. But there were things that didn't add up, little inconsistencies that my lawyer's brain cataloged even as my mother's heart tried to dismiss them. Sophia always paid for personal items in cash, large bills that she pulled from her wallet without explanation. When I suggested she put some purchases on a credit card to earn points, she demurred, saying she didn't trust credit cards after identity theft had ruined her credit years ago. Fair enough, except there was no record of any credit monitoring services in her name. I checked. Casually, professionally, the way I check on any client's financial situation. Then there were the stories that shifted like sand. At our first dinner, Sophia said she'd grown up in Portland, an only child in the city. 2 weeks later, she mentioned childhood memories of her grandparents' farm upstate. When I gently pointed out the inconsistency, she laughed it off as grief brain, saying she sometimes got confused about which memories belonged to which phase of her childhood. Reasonable. Understandable. Except that a therapist specializing in trauma should have been more aware of their own memory patterns. The wedding guest list was perhaps the strangest thing. Daniel's side had 80 people, friends from college, colleagues from his firm, cousins and uncles and family friends who'd known him since birth. Sophia's side had 12 people. 12. And when I asked about them, she had explanations for each one. A colleague from the clinic where she worked. A friend from graduate school. Her yoga instructor who'd become like a sister. But no one from her childhood. No one who'd known her parents. No one who could verify the story of the orphan girl who'd pulled herself up from tragedy. Don't you think it's odd? I asked Daniel one evening when I stopped by his apartment. That we haven't met anyone from Sophia's past? His face closed off immediately. "Mom, we've talked about this. Her family is gone. She doesn't stay in touch with people from before the accident because it's too painful." "What about coworkers? Her therapist colleagues?" "She keeps her professional and personal lives separate. It's a boundary thing. You of all people should understand professional boundaries." He was right. I did understand boundaries. What I didn't understand was a woman in her late 20s who had no digital footprint beyond the past 2 years. No Facebook account with old photos and birthday wishes from high school friends. No LinkedIn profile showing her career progression. No professional licensing information in the state database for therapists. I know because I looked. 3 months into their engagement, I did what I'd done for 35 years of protecting clients. I ran a background check. And that's when everything changed. The report came back on a Thursday afternoon. I was in my office, between client meetings, when the email arrived from the private investigation firm I'd used for decades. They were discreet, thorough, and they'd never failed me. The first line of the report made my blood run cold. Subject Sophia Hearns, DOB provided, does not exist in any official capacity. I read on, my hands starting to shake. No professional therapy license under that name in any state. No college transcripts from the graduate program she claimed to have attended. No tax returns filed under that social security number because the number itself was fraudulent. But there was a match. A facial recognition match to a woman named Victoria Castellano, 32 years old, with 2 arrests for fraud in Nevada and California. The photos were unmistakable. Same face, same bone structure, just different hair color and styling. Victoria Castellano had been arrested 4 years ago for running a romance scam targeting wealthy widowers in Las Vegas. She'd posed as a grief counselor, befriended vulnerable men, convinced them to invest in fake business ventures, and disappeared with nearly $200,000. The case had been dismissed on a technicality, but the pattern was clear. 3 years ago, she'd been arrested again in San Francisco for identity theft and fraud. This time she'd targeted the adult children of wealthy deceased parents, positioning herself as a potential spouse who could help them through their grief. She'd gotten engaged to a software engineer who'd just lost his mother, planned an elaborate wedding, and disappeared 3 days before the ceremony with everything she could liquidate. That case resulted in probation and restitution that she'd never paid. Now she was Sophia Hearns, trauma therapist, orphaned daughter, perfect bride-to-be. And she had her hooks deep in my son. I sat in my office until the sun went down, reading and rereading the report. Part of me wanted to believe there was some mistake, some explanation. But I'd built my career on pattern recognition, and this pattern was crystal clear. Victoria Castellano had found her next mark, and his name was Daniel Hartwell. The question was what to do about it. I couldn't just show Daniel the report. I knew my son. He was already defensive about Sophia, already convinced I was being an overprotective mother who couldn't accept another woman in his life. If I came at him with accusations, he dismissed them as jealousy or paranoia. Sophia had been too careful, too skilled at manipulation. She'd already planted the seeds of doubt about my motives. No, I needed something more. Something undeniable. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called an old colleague, a retired FBI agent who now worked private security for high-net-worth individuals. His name was Thomas, and he owed me a favor from a case I'd helped him with years ago. Thomas, I need surveillance, I told him. Discreet, professional, and fast. I think my son is being targeted by a professional con artist. Eleanor, are you sure? These things can get messy. I'm sure. And I need proof before she gets access to his accounts. When's the wedding? 8 weeks. He whistled low. That's cutting it close. What's your budget? Whatever it takes. The surveillance started the next day. Thomas put a team on Sophia, tracking her movements, monitoring her communications where legal, identifying her associates. What they found in the first week alone was damning. Sophia didn't work at any trauma clinic. The address she'd given Daniel for her office was actually a Pilates studio where she had a membership. She spent her days shopping, meeting with a man Thomas identified as James Crawford, and visiting properties in expensive neighborhoods. James Crawford had his own record. 3 arrests for fraud, 1 conviction, and a known association with Victoria Castellano going back 6 years. They'd worked together before, running romance scams as a team. James would pose as various professionals, lawyers, financial advisors, wedding planners, creating a web of false legitimacy around Victoria's assumed identities. The recordings Thomas obtained, perfectly legal from public spaces, were even more revealing. Sophia and James met at a coffee shop 2 weeks before I hired Thomas, and their conversation made my stomach turn. The mother's already in for over 100,000, Sophia said, her voice nothing like the soft, sweet tone I knew. After the wedding, I'll have joint access to Daniel's accounts. He's worth at least $500,000, maybe more with the trust fund from his father's estate. What about the mother? She's a lawyer. Won't she be suspicious? She's already suspicious, but Daniel won't listen to her. I've made sure of that. Every time she raises a concern, I play the wounded orphan card. Works every time. Besides, we'll be long gone before she can do anything legal. When do we move? 3 months after the wedding. That's the sweet spot. Long enough to establish marital asset claims, short enough that they don't see it coming. Then we liquidate what we can and disappear. I'm thinking Europe this time. Maybe Greece. I listened to that recording 17 times. Each time, I felt a piece of my heart harden into something cold and sharp. This woman wasn't just stealing money. She was stealing my son's capacity to trust, to love, to believe in anything good. She was destroying him in slow motion, and she was enjoying every minute of it. But I still couldn't just hand Daniel the evidence. I knew how these things worked. Sophia would deny it, claim the recordings were fabricated, weaponize Daniel's grief and his need to believe in something beautiful. I needed to force her hand, to make her reveal herself in a way that even my broken-hearted son couldn't deny. That's when I formulated the plan. It was risky. It was brutal. And it would probably cost me my relationship with Daniel, at least temporarily. But it would save him. 6 weeks before the wedding, I made my first move. I called Daniel and asked him to lunch, just the two of us. He seemed surprised but agreed. We met at his father's favorite restaurant, a quiet Italian place downtown. "Mom, is everything okay?" he asked after we ordered. "I need to talk to you about Sophia," I said carefully. "Some things have come up in the wedding planning that concern me." His face closed off immediately. "If this is about the cost again." "It's not about the cost. Daniel, I ran a background check." The color drained from his face, then flooded back in angry red. "You did what?" "Sweetheart, please listen. There are inconsistencies in Sophia's story that I can't explain. Her professional credentials don't check out. Her background is full of holes. I think she might not be who she says she is." Daniel stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "I can't believe you. I finally find happiness after Dad died, and you can't stand it. You can't stand that I might need someone other than you. That's not what this is. Sophia warned me you might do this. She said you'd try to sabotage us because you're threatened by another woman in my life. I told her she was wrong, that my mother would never be so cruel. But here we are. Daniel, please. Just look at the report. That's all I'm asking. I'm not looking at anything. And if you can't be happy for me, if you can't accept Sophia, then maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding." He left cash on the table and walked out. I sat there alone, surrounded by the ghosts of family dinners past, and I knew I'd just lost the first battle. But the war wasn't over yet. What would you do if you discovered the person your child loved was a professional predator, but warning them only pushed them further into danger? The rehearsal dinner invitation arrived exactly 1 week after Daniel walked out of that restaurant. Not by mail. Not by text. By courier. A formal, cream-colored envelope with calligraphy so perfect it looked machine-printed. Inside, 2 cards. One was the invitation itself, embossed with gold lettering announcing the celebration at Riverside Estate. The other was a letter, handwritten in Sophia's delicate script. "Dear Eleanor," it read. "After careful consideration and discussion with Daniel, we've decided it would be best if you did not attend the rehearsal dinner or the wedding ceremony. Your recent actions have shown a lack of respect for our relationship and our boundaries. However, in the spirit of family healing, you're welcome to attend the reception only, provided you offer a public apology for your unfounded accusations. We hope you'll use this time to reflect on the importance of supporting your son's happiness. With hope for reconciliation, Sophia." I read it 3 times, each word a carefully placed landmine designed to look like an olive branch. The audacity of it was almost impressive. She'd managed to frame my exclusion as my own fault, positioned herself as the gracious victim offering forgiveness, and trapped me in a corner where any protest would make me look petty and controlling. But Sophia had made a critical error. She'd forgotten who she was dealing with. I wasn't just a grieving mother. I was a lawyer who'd spent 3.5 decades dismantling carefully constructed lies for a living. And she'd just declared war using a weapon I knew better than she ever could: paperwork. I sat down at my desk that night and opened my laptop. Every vendor contract for the wedding was in my name. Every deposit check had my signature. Every communication chain started with my email address. Sophia had been so focused on the money that she'd never bothered to ensure her name appeared anywhere on the legal documents. Why would she? She planned to be gone in 3 months anyway, leaving Daniel with the debt and me with the memories of funding my son's destruction. The first call I made was to Riverside Estate. It was 9 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, but I had the personal cell number of Margaret Chin, the events director. We'd worked together on several charity functions over the years. Margaret, it's Eleanor Hartwell. I'm so sorry to call this late. Eleanor, don't worry about it. Is everything all right with Daniel's wedding? I let my voice crack just slightly. Actually, that's why I'm calling. There's been a family emergency. We need to postpone the wedding indefinitely. The silence on the other end stretched for 3 heartbeats. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry to hear that. Is everyone okay? It's complicated, Margaret. But I need to request a full refund of our deposit per the emergency clause in our contract. More silence. Then, carefully, Eleanor, you know I adore you, but the emergency clause requires documentation. A medical emergency, death in the family, military deployment. Those are the covered circumstances. What if I told you the bride isn't who she claims to be? That I have evidence of fraud? Then I'd say you need to provide that evidence to our legal team, and they'd make a determination. But Eleanor, her voice softened, is this really about fraud, or is this about cold feet? Because if it's the latter, there's nothing I can do. I made a decision in that moment. The truth, or at least enough of it to plant seeds. Margaret, how well do you know Sophia Hearns? I've met with her 4 times for planning sessions. She seems lovely. Have you ever worked with her professionally before? Maybe she planned events at the estate under a different name. Another pause. Why would she use a different name? Humor me. Can you check your records for a Victoria Castellano? She would have been there about 4 or 5 years ago. I heard typing. Then Margaret's sharp intake of breath. We have a flag in our system. Victoria Castellano attempted to book a wedding in 2019. She paid a deposit with a check that bounced. We had to pursue collections. Eleanor, are you telling me? I'm telling you that Sophia Hearns and Victoria Castellano are the same person. And I have documentation to prove it. Margaret, I need you to do something for me, and I know it's unusual, but please trust me. What do you need? I need you to continue as if everything is normal. Confirm the final details with Sophia. Accept her calls. But don't process any remaining payments until you hear from me directly. Can you do that? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. Eleanor, what are you planning? I'm planning to save my son. And I'm going to need your help to do it. By the end of that week, I'd contacted every single vendor. The florist, the caterer, the photographer, the string quartet, the cake designer, the transportation company. Each conversation followed the same pattern. I'd explain there was a complication with the bride's identity. I'd ask them to verify their contracts, which were all in my name. And I'd request they pause any final preparations until they heard from me directly. Some were concerned. Some were confused. But they all agreed, because at the end of the day, I was the one who'd signed the contracts and paid the deposits. Sophia's name appeared nowhere in the legal chain of the wedding planning. She'd been so confident in her con that she'd never bothered to protect herself with documentation. But the real masterstroke, the move that would bring everything crashing down, required help from someone who hated Sophia even more than I did. Thomas had been thorough in his investigation. Among the evidence he'd gathered was information about James Crawford's current situation. James, it turned out, had his own reasons to want revenge against Victoria. She'd cut him out of their last score, kept all the money for herself, and left him holding the bag when the victim's family came looking for answers. He'd spent 6 months in county jail because of her betrayal. You want me to find him? Thomas asked when I outlined my plan. I want you to arrange a meeting. Somewhere public, safe, where we can talk. Eleanor, this is dangerous. These people are criminals. So is Sophia. And she's about to marry my son. I'll take my chances. 3 days later, I sat across from James Crawford in a coffee shop in downtown Portland. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with the kind of face that could be trustworthy or dangerous depending on the angle. He wore a leather jacket and jeans, and his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging exits and threats. You're the mother, he said. It wasn't a question. And you're the accomplice. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Former accomplice. Victoria and I had a falling out. She stole from you. She did more than that. She destroyed my reputation in our circles. No one will work with me now because they think I'm the one who'll turn on them. Ironic, isn't it? I slid a folder across the table. This is everything I know about Sophia's current operation. Her timeline, her target amount, her exit strategy. I want to offer you a deal. James opened the folder, his expression unreadable as he scanned the contents. What kind of deal? I want you to show up at the wedding. I want you to expose her in front of everyone. And in exchange, I'll make sure the authorities know you cooperated in bringing down a serial fraudster. It might not erase your record, but it could help your situation. You want me to burn my ex-partner in public. I want you to tell the truth. There's a difference. He closed the folder and leaned back, studying me with those restless eyes. You know she'll hate you for this. Your son will probably hate you too, at least for a while. I know. And you're willing to pay that price? What price is too high to save your child? James was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. A young girl, maybe 8 years old, smiling at the camera. My daughter. I haven't seen her in 3 years because of the choices I made with Victoria. Her mother won't let me near her until I prove I've changed. So yeah, Mrs. Hartwell, I'll help you. Not because I care about your son, but because maybe, just maybe, doing one right thing will start to balance out all the wrong ones. We shook hands across the table, two people from completely different worlds united by the damage one woman had caused. The next 2 weeks were a chess match played in silence. Sophia called me twice, her voice dripping with false concern, asking if I'd thought about her offer to attend the reception. Each time, I told her I needed more time to process my emotions, playing the part of the chastened mother reconsidering her position. Each time, I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. She thought she'd won. Meanwhile, Thomas's team continued surveillance. They documented Sophia meeting with James's replacement, a man named Kevin who was helping her set up the financial infrastructure for the post-wedding theft. They recorded conversations about which of Daniel's accounts would be easiest to access, which assets could be quickly liquidated, and where she planned to go once she disappeared. She's talking about the Cayman Islands this time, Thomas told me during one of our evening briefings. Says she's tired of Europe. Wants somewhere with better banking privacy and beaches. How romantic, I said, my voice flat. She's planning her honeymoon heist. But the evidence, damning as it was, still wasn't enough to guarantee Daniel would believe me. I knew my son. I knew how grief had hollowed him out and how desperately he needed to believe in Sophia's love. Recordings could be dismissed as fabrications. Documents could be explained away as coincidences. I needed something more visceral, more immediate, more undeniable. I needed Sophia to destroy herself. For days before the wedding, I made my boldest move yet. I called Sophia directly. Eleanor, she answered, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Have you reconsidered? I have. Sophia, I owe you an apology. I let my grief over Richard's death cloud my judgment. I projected my fear of being alone onto your relationship with Daniel. It was wrong of me, and I'm truly sorry. Silence. Then, cautiously, that means a lot to hear, Eleanor. I'd like to make it up to you. I know I'm not invited to the rehearsal dinner or the ceremony, but I'd love to take you to lunch tomorrow. Just the two of us. A chance for me to properly apologize and welcome you into the family. More silence. I could almost hear her calculating, weighing the risks and benefits. Finally, I'd like that. Where did you have in mind? The garden terrace. It's where Richard proposed to me. I thought it would be meaningful. That's very thoughtful. Tomorrow at noon. Perfect. And Sophia? Thank you for giving me another chance. Family forgives, Eleanor. That's what you taught me. I hung up and immediately called Thomas. She took the bait. Tomorrow at noon. Make sure your people are in position. Eleanor, what are you planning? I'm planning to give her enough rope to hang herself. The garden terrace was exactly what it sounded like, an upscale restaurant with tables scattered among flowering plants and water features, the whole space enclosed in glass to maintain the garden atmosphere year-round. It was beautiful, romantic, and most importantly for my purposes, it had excellent acoustics. Every word spoken carried through the space. I arrived 15 minutes early and chose a table near the center, visible from every angle. I was wearing a wire, a tiny device Thomas had provided that would record everything said at our table. But more than that, I was wearing the pearl necklace Richard had given me on our 25th anniversary. Sophia had admired it once, mentioned how her mother had owned something similar before the accident. Another lie in a constellation of lies. Sophia arrived exactly on time, looking radiant in a pale blue dress that probably cost more than the average person's monthly rent. She kissed my cheek, a gesture that made my skin crawl, and sat down with a gracious smile. Eleanor, thank you so much for reaching out. I was hoping we could move past this tension. So was I, dear. So was I. I poured us both water from the pitcher on the table. Tell me, how are the final wedding preparations going? You must be so excited. Oh, it's been a whirlwind. The dress fitting yesterday was perfect. The final walkthrough at Riverside Estate confirmed every detail. Everything is coming together exactly as I dreamed. I'm glad. A bride should have her perfect day. I paused, then added, though I have to admit, I'm still a bit confused about one thing. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. What's that? Your family. I know you said they passed away, and I'm so sorry for your loss. But Daniel mentioned you sometimes get cards from an aunt in Seattle. I was hoping to perhaps reach out to her, to let her know she's welcome at the wedding despite the difficult family history you mentioned. I watched her face carefully. This was the moment. There was no aunt in Seattle. It was a detail I'd fabricated and planted with Daniel 2 weeks ago in a casual conversation, a test to see if Sophia was paying attention to the details of her own lies. Oh, that aunt, Sophia recovered quickly, but I saw the flicker of panic. Actually, she's more of a family friend, not a blood relation. And we've lost touch recently. I don't think she'd come. That's a shame. Family is so important. Even the family we choose rather than the family we're born to. Don't you agree? Absolutely. That's why I'm so grateful Daniel and I found each other. And why I'm grateful for the chance to have you as family, Eleanor. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold despite the warm restaurant. Sophia, can I ask you something? And I want you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Do you love my son? She didn't hesitate. With all my heart. Daniel saved me, Eleanor. After losing my parents, I was so alone. Meeting him, building a life together, it's given me purpose again. I know the wedding seems extravagant, but it's because I want to celebrate what we have. I want everyone to see how much he means to me. It was a perfect answer. Heartfelt, vulnerable, exactly what a future mother-in-law would want to hear. And it was delivered with such conviction that if I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed every word. That's beautiful, Sophia. Truly. I squeezed her hand. I'm sorry I doubted you. A mother's love can sometimes make her overprotective. I understand. I'd probably do the same thing if I were in your position. Would you, I thought? Would you really? Or would you just see another opportunity to exploit? We ordered lunch, and the conversation drifted to safer topics. The weather, the menu, trivial gossip about mutual acquaintances. But then, as our entrees arrived, I steered us back to dangerous waters. I've been thinking, I said, cutting into my salmon. About the future. After the wedding, where do you and Daniel plan to live? We're looking at houses in the Bridgeport area. There's a beautiful colonial that just came on the market. For bedrooms, perfect for the family we want to start. That sounds lovely. And expensive. I hope Daniel's firm is doing well enough to support that kind of purchase. Something flickered in her eyes. Actually, we were hoping you might help with the down payment. As a wedding gift. Daniel mentioned his father left him a trust fund, but it's tied up in some kind of legal structure that makes it hard to access quickly. There it was. The first open grab for money beyond the wedding expenses. Did Daniel ask you to bring this up with me? No, she backpedaled quickly. It was just a thought. We haven't discussed it seriously. Because the trust fund isn't tied up at all. It's perfectly accessible. Daniel could withdraw from it tomorrow if he wanted to. Sophia's smile froze. Oh, I must have misunderstood. Or perhaps Daniel doesn't know how much money he actually has access to. It's possible he's never checked the full balance. Richard and I were private about finances, and Daniel's never been particularly interested in money management. I watched her process this information, saw the calculations happening behind those beautiful eyes. How much was the trust worth? How much could she take before anyone noticed? How quickly could she get access? Eleanor, hope you don't think I'm with Daniel for his money. Of course not, dear. But it does bring up an important question. Have you and Daniel discussed a prenuptial agreement? The temperature at our table dropped 10 degrees. A prenup? No, we haven't. We love each other. We trust each other. Those things are for people who go into marriage expecting it to fail. Or for people who want to protect both parties in case the unexpected happens. I am a lawyer, after all. I've seen how quickly love can turn complicated when finances get involved. Sophia set down her fork carefully. Are you suggesting we need a prenup? I'm suggesting it might be wise. As a wedding gift, I'd be happy to have my firm draw one up. No cost to you or Daniel. Just a simple agreement protecting both of your interests. That's very generous, Eleanor, but I don't think it's necessary. Daniel and I are building a life together based on trust, not legal contracts. Marriage itself is a legal contract, Sophia. You know what I mean. Oh, I knew exactly what she meant. She meant that a prenup would destroy her entire plan. She meant that legal documentation of assets would make it impossible to disappear with Daniel's money. She meant that I'd just threatened everything she'd worked for over the past 6 months. Well, I said lightly, it's just a thought. Something to consider. We finished lunch with strained pleasantness, and when the check came, I paid it with a credit card, making sure Sophia saw the name on the card, Eleanor Hartwell, attorney at law. A little reminder of exactly who she was dealing with. As we stood to leave, Sophia hugged me, and I felt her whisper in my ear, I know what you're trying to do, Eleanor. It won't work. Daniel loves me, and nothing you say or do will change that. I pulled back and smiled at her, my most gracious, motherly smile. We'll see, dear. We'll see. That night, I listened to the recording of our lunch 3 times. Then I sent it to Thomas, to James, and to the investigator I'd hired to build the case against Victoria Castellano. Every word she'd said was another nail in the coffin she didn't know she was building. But the real weapon, the nuclear option I'd been saving, required one more piece of the puzzle. 2 days before the wedding, I received a call from Daniel. His voice was strained, tired. Mom, we need to talk. My heart clenched. Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong? Can you come over? To the apartment? Alone. I drove to his place with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Had he figured it out? Had Sophia told him about our lunch and spun it into something ugly? Was this the moment I lost my son forever? Daniel opened the door looking like he hadn't slept in days. His apartment, usually neat, was scattered with wedding planning documents and empty coffee cups. Mom, sit down. Please. I sat on the edge of his couch, my purse clutched in my lap like a shield. Something happened today, he began. Something that doesn't make sense. What happened? I called the venue to confirm the final head count. Margaret, the events director, she seemed confused. She said you'd called about postponing the wedding. She said you'd asked her to hold off on processing final payments. My breath caught. Margaret wasn't supposed to mention that to anyone. Daniel. Then I called the florist. Same story. And the caterer. And the photographer. Mom, every single vendor told me you'd contacted them asking them to pause preparations. His voice cracked. What's going on? This was it. The moment where I either confessed everything or lost him completely. I was trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From being happy? From moving on after Dad died? From being destroyed by a woman who's been lying to you from the moment you met her? Daniel stood up, pacing the small living room. We're back to this? I thought you'd accepted Sophia. I thought lunch the other day meant you were moving past your jealousy. It's not jealousy, Daniel. It's evidence. Sophia isn't who she says she is. Her real name is Victoria Castellano, and she's a professional con artist who's been targeting you since the day she walked into that grief support group. Stop. Just stop. I have recordings of her planning to steal from you. I have documentation of her previous arrests. I don't care what you have. He shouted it, his face red with anger and something else. Something that looked like fear. Do you know what you've done? Sophia is in her hotel room right now, crying, because she just found out that half the vendors are refusing to finalize our wedding. Do you have any idea how humiliated she is? How humiliated I am. Daniel, please. Just look at the evidence. That's all I'm asking. Look at the documents and tell me you still believe she's who she claims to be. He turned to face me, and I saw my son as I'd never seen him before. Not angry, not grieving, but trapped between two impossible choices. If I look at your evidence, he said slowly, and it's what you say it is, then I've been the world's biggest fool. I've been in love with a lie. I've spent 6 months building a future with someone who was planning to destroy me. Do you understand what that would mean? What that would do to me? I understand it would hurt. But Daniel, the alternative is worse. If you marry her, and if I don't look at the evidence, if I choose to believe in Sophia, then either I'm right and I can save my wedding and my happiness, or I'm wrong and I'll find out eventually anyway. But at least I'll have had a few more days of believing in something good. The logic was torture, and we both knew it. So here's what's going to happen, Daniel continued, his voice eerily calm. You're going to call every vendor and tell them it was a misunderstanding. You're going to make sure my wedding happens exactly as planned. And after Sophia and I are married, after we're back from our honeymoon, then I'll look at your evidence. But not before. I can't, his voice broke, I can't lose her and Dad in the same year. I can't survive that. Would you sacrifice truth for temporary peace? Would you choose comfortable lies over devastating reality if you knew the truth was coming for you anyway? Because in that moment, watching my son bargain with fate, I understood the cruelest truth of all. Sometimes the people we love choose their own destruction, and all we can do is watch and wait for the moment they're ready to be saved. I'm not calling the vendors, I said quietly. And I'm not going to let you marry a woman who's planning to destroy you. Daniel's face went cold. Then you're not welcome at anything. Not the reception. Not our lives. Nothing. We're done. Daniel, get out. I stood, my legs shaking, and walked to the door. Before I left, I turned back one last time. When this all falls apart, and it will, I'll be here. That's what mothers do. We're here even when our children hate us for it. The door closed behind me, and I stood in the hallway listening to the sound of my son breaking down on the other side. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to go back, to comfort him, to fix this. But I couldn't fix it. Not yet. I had one more card to play. And in 48 hours, at a wedding that Sophia thought was secure and Daniel thought was saved, I was going to play it. The question wasn't whether I was willing to become the villain in my son's story. The question was whether I was strong enough to stay the villain long enough for him to see the truth. Have you ever stood at the edge of burning every bridge you have, knowing that on the other side of the flames might be the only chance to save someone you love? Because that's exactly where I found myself on the morning of Daniel's wedding day, standing in my bedroom at 5 a.m, staring at the dress I'd bought to wear to a celebration that was about to become an execution. The wedding was scheduled for 2 o'clock in the afternoon at Riverside Estate. By my calculations, Sophia would discover the full extent of my sabotage around 11, when vendors started arriving to set up and found that nothing, absolutely nothing, had been finalized. No flowers. No catering. No music. No ceremony arch. Just an empty venue and a bride whose perfect con was about to collapse in spectacular fashion. But here's the thing about revenge, about justice, about whatever you want to call what I was doing. It's never as clean as you imagine it will be. It's never as satisfying in the moment as you think it should be. Because the person you're saving is standing right next to the person you're destroying, and they can't tell the difference yet. My phone rang at 6:30. Daniel. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me this was important. Mom. His voice was hollow. Sophia's not answering her phone. She was supposed to meet me for breakfast, but she's not at her hotel. Her bridesmaids haven't heard from her. Where is she? And there it was. The first crack in the facade. Sophia wasn't missing because something bad had happened to her. She was missing because she'd just discovered that her carefully planned wedding had been dismantled piece by piece, and she was trying to figure out how to salvage it without revealing who she really was. I don't know where she is, sweetheart. This is because of you, isn't it? What you did with the vendors. She found out everything's been canceled, and now she's panicking. Mom, please. Please tell me how to fix this. I closed my eyes. Daniel, the only way to fix this is to postpone the wedding and look at the evidence I have. That's it. That's the only path forward. I can't do that to her. Then I can't help you. He hung up without another word, and I sat on the edge of my bed, wondering if I just made the worst mistake of my life or the bravest decision of my career as a mother. At 9 o'clock, Thomas called with an update. Sophia just met with James Crawford, her old partner. Our surveillance caught the whole thing. She knows the wedding is falling apart, and she's trying to convince James to help her run one final play. She wants to show up at the venue, play the devastated bride, and guilt you into paying for everything to be restored. She thinks Daniel will side with her if she can frame this as you sabotaging her special day out of spite. What did James say? He told her no. He told her the game is over. And Eleanor, she threatened him. Said if he didn't help her, she'd make sure he went back to prison for violating his probation. Is he still willing to show up at the venue? More than ever. He wants to see her go down. I took a deep breath. Then let's give her a wedding she'll never forget. I arrived at Riverside Estate at noon, 2 hours before the ceremony was supposed to start. The parking lot was already filling with guests, people who had no idea they were about to witness something far more dramatic than a simple wedding. I parked in the back, near the service entrance, and made my way through the gardens to the main building. Margaret Chin, the events director, found me immediately. Eleanor, thank God. We have a situation. I know. How bad is it? The bride arrived an hour ago, hysterical. She's demanding to know why nothing is set up. I told her we were waiting for final payment authorization from you, as per your instructions. She's threatening to sue. She's threatening to call the police. She's saying you've sabotaged her wedding out of jealousy. Where is she now? In the bridal suite with Daniel. He's trying to calm her down, but Eleanor, it's not going well. I can hear them shouting from here. I followed Margaret through the winding corridors of the estate to the bridal suite, a luxurious room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens. Outside the door, I could indeed hear raised voices. Sophia's, high-pitched and desperate. Daniel's, confused and pleading. Your mother did this. Sophia was screaming. She canceled everything because she can't stand that you chose me over her. She's a controlling, manipulative woman who wants to keep you dependent on her forever. Sophia, please. There has to be an explanation. My mother wouldn't just destroy our wedding for no reason. Wouldn't she? Daniel, wake up. She's been trying to break us up from the beginning. The background check, the lunch where she suggested a prenup, the calls to vendors. This is her final play to prove she controls your life. I knocked on the door, firm and authoritative. The shouting stopped immediately. Come in, Daniel's voice, barely audible. I opened the door and stepped into chaos. Sophia stood in the center of the room in her wedding dress, makeup streaked with tears, hands clenched into fists. Daniel sat on the edge of an antique sofa, his head in his hands, still in the casual clothes he'd worn to meet Sophia for breakfast. The bridesmaids had clearly been dismissed, their abandoned mimosa glasses scattered on various surfaces. Hello, Sophia. Daniel. Sophia's eyes blazed with hatred. You destroyed everything. My wedding, my day, my happiness. What kind of monster are you? The kind who loves her son enough to save him from a professional con artist. Daniel's head snapped up. Mom, don't. But I was done being silent. I was done playing defense. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the room's Bluetooth speaker system, one of those modern conveniences built into luxury estates. Before anyone says another word, I want you both to listen to something. I pressed play on the recording from Sophia's meeting with James that morning. The audio quality was crystal clear, thanks to Thomas's top-tier surveillance equipment. Sophia's voice filled the room. The old lady sabotaged everything. She's smarter than I thought. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to play the devastated bride. Daniel will pressure her to fix it. And once everything's back on track, we move up the timeline. I'm not waiting 3 months after the wedding. We drain the accounts within 2 weeks and disappear. James's voice responded, Victoria, it's over. Walk away before this gets worse. Don't call me that. I'm Sophia now. Sophia Hearns, the orphan trauma therapist who fell in love with a grieving architect. And I'm not walking away from $500,000 because his mother got suspicious. Daniel stood up slowly, his face ashen. What is this? This is a recording from this morning, I said quietly. Of your fiancé discussing how to steal from you and disappear. Sophia lunged for my phone, but I held it away, backing toward the door. That's fabricated. She hired someone to fake that recording. Daniel, you can't believe this. But Daniel wasn't looking at her. He was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between betrayal and dawning horror. Keep listening, I said, and played the next part. James's voice. What about the son? Does he know anything? Sophia laughing. Daniel? God, no. He's so desperate to believe someone loves him that he'll swallow any lie I feed him. His father's death made him perfect. Vulnerable, wealthy, and completely blinded by grief. I could tell him I'm a Nigerian princess, and he'd probably believe it. The color drained from Daniel's face. He sat back down heavily, like someone had cut his strings. That's not me, Sophia tried again, but her voice had changed. The sweet, soft tone was gone, replaced by something harder, sharper. Someone's impersonating me. Daniel, please. You know me. You know I'd never say those things. Victoria Castellano, I said quietly. That's your real name. You're 32 years old, not 28. You've been arrested twice for fraud. You've run this exact scam at least 4 times before. The trauma therapist story, the dead parents, the grief support group hunting ground. It's all a script you've perfected. Daniel looked up at Sophia, and I saw the moment his heart broke. Is that true? Is any of what my mother is saying true? Sophia's mask cracked. For just a second, I saw the real woman underneath the performance. Cold, calculating, and absolutely furious at being caught. Then she made her choice. She could try to maintain the lie, or she could cut her losses. She chose option 3, attack. Fine, she spat. You want the truth? Yes, I'm Victoria. Yes, this was a con. And yes, Daniel, you were pathetically easy to manipulate. Your grief made you stupid. Your need for someone to love you made you blind. I've worked harder jobs for less money. Daniel flinched like she'd slapped him. But here's what's going to happen, Sophia continued, her voice pure venom now. I'm walking out of here. You're not going to call the police because you're too humiliated to admit you fell for this. And your mother gets to live with the knowledge that she was right, but she destroyed her relationship with you in the process. Congratulations, Eleanor. You saved him from me, but you lost him anyway. She gathered her dress and headed for the door, but I didn't move out of the way. You're not leaving, Victoria. Watch me. Margaret, I called, and the events director appeared with 2 uniformed police officers. These officers have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit theft. You're not walking away this time. Sophia, Victoria, whoever she really was, looked at the officers with something like surprise. Then she looked at me, and I saw genuine respect flicker across her face. You played me, she said softly. From the beginning. The lunch, the vendor calls, even kicking me out of the wedding. You were building a case. I'm a lawyer, Victoria. It's what I do. The officers moved forward with handcuffs, and Victoria didn't resist. As they read her rights, she looked at Daniel one last time. For what it's worth, she said, I almost felt something for you. Almost. You're a good man, Daniel. Just incredibly, painfully naive. They led her away, and the room fell into crushing silence. Daniel sat on the sofa, still in shock, staring at nothing. I wanted to go to him, to hold him, to tell him everything would be okay. But I knew better than to crowd him in this moment. How long have you known? He finally asked. About 3 months. He laughed, a broken sound. 3 months. And you didn't say anything. I tried. You wouldn't listen. So you destroyed my wedding instead. I saved your life instead. He stood up, pacing the room like a caged animal. Do you have any idea how this feels? To know that someone studied me, learned my weaknesses, and used them against me? To know that every kiss, every conversation, every moment I thought was real was just part of a script. I know it hurts. You don't know anything. He shouted it, then lowered his voice. Sorry. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. You were trying to protect me. I know that. But God, Mom, I feel so stupid. So completely, utterly stupid. You're not stupid. You're human. And you were grieving. Victoria targeted you specifically because of your vulnerability. Which makes it worse. I wasn't even a random victim. I was selected. I moved closer, risking his anger. Daniel, look at me. He did, and I saw my son as he was, stripped of pretense and pride, just raw and hurting. Your father would be proud of you. For being a fool? For having the capacity to love deeply enough that someone could exploit it. For being brave enough to trust after loss. For being the kind of man who believes in second chances and redemption. I took his hands. Victoria was wrong about one thing. Your grief didn't make you stupid. It made you human. And there's no shame in that. He pulled me into a hug, and we stood there in the bridal suite of a wedding that would never happen, holding each other while he cried for the future he'd lost and the love that was never real. After a while, he pulled back and wiped his eyes. What happens now? There are 200 people downstairs waiting for a wedding. Well, I said carefully, we could send them home. Or what? Or we could tell them the truth. Not the details, but enough. And then we could turn this into something else. A celebration of truth, of family, of survival. You want to throw a party on the day my wedding just imploded? I want to show you that life continues even when your plans fall apart. That joy can exist alongside pain. That you're not alone in this. Daniel considered it for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. A real smile, small but genuine. Dad would have loved that. The sheer audacity of it. He would have insisted on it. So that's what we did. Daniel changed out of his wedding casual wear into a suit. I put on my mother-of-the-groom dress. And together, we walked downstairs to where Margaret had gathered all the confused wedding guests in the main hall. Daniel stood before them, and the room fell silent. Thank you all for coming today, he began, his voice steady. As you may have noticed, there's no ceremony set up. That's because there's not going to be a wedding. The woman I was supposed to marry turned out to be someone very different than who she claimed to be. And my mother, he gestured to me, saved me from making the worst mistake of my life. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I know this is awkward. I know you got dressed up, drove here, brought gifts for a celebration that's not happening. So here's what I'm proposing. The catering's not here, but the estate has a restaurant. The flowers aren't here, but the gardens are beautiful. The music's not here, but I know at least 3 of you brought guitars in your cars because you always do. A few nervous laughs. So let's not waste the day. Let's not waste the gathering of people I love. Let's celebrate survival, truth, and the fact that I'm standing here free instead of married to a con artist. What do you say? There was a moment of uncertainty. Then Daniel's best friend Marcus stood up and started clapping. Others joined in, and soon the entire room was applauding. What followed was one of the strangest, most beautiful afternoons of my life. The estate restaurant opened early and served family-style lunch. People brought instruments from their cars and played music in the gardens. Daniel's friends told embarrassing stories about him, the kind you usually save for rehearsal dinners. And slowly, what should have been the worst day of his life transformed into something healing. I found myself in the garden around 4 o'clock, watching Daniel laugh with his friends, when Thomas approached. You did good work, Eleanor. Did I? My son just had his heart broken and his trust shattered. Your son just discovered who he can count on. That's worth more than a comfortable lie. I hope he thinks so in a year. Thomas handed me a folder. Final report on Victoria Castellano. The prosecutor is pursuing maximum charges. With the evidence we gathered, plus testimony from James and 3 previous victims who came forward, she's looking at 12 to 15 years. I took the folder but didn't open it. What about James? Reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation. He'll do community service and probation. Turns out helping bring down a serial fraudster buys you some goodwill. And his daughter? Thomas smiled. He called her mother this afternoon. They're arranging supervised visits. It's a start. 6 months later, I sat in my office when Daniel knocked on the door. He'd been in therapy, processing the betrayal and learning to trust again. We'd had dinner every week, rebuilding our relationship one conversation at a time. Mom, I want to show you something. He pulled out his phone and showed me a dating profile. A woman named Rebecca, a kindergarten teacher, smiling naturally in a photo with her dog. We've been talking for about a month. Nothing serious yet. But I wanted you to know. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I also wanted to ask if you'd be willing to meet her. Not right away, but eventually. When we're both ready. Of course. Though I should warn you, I'll probably run a background check. He laughed. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Actually, I already did one myself. Clean as a whistle. No arrests, no false identities, verifiable employment history, and a presence on social media that goes back 10 years. You learned something after all. I learned that trust isn't the same as blindness. That loving someone doesn't mean ignoring red flags. And that sometimes the people who seem like they're trying to control us are actually trying to save us. He hugged me, and I felt the last piece of ice around my heart melt. I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner, he said. I'm sorry I had to go nuclear to make you listen. Would you do it again? I thought about that question. About the wedding I destroyed, the vendors I misled, the public spectacle I created. About the look on Daniel's face when Victoria's mask finally fell. About the 6 months of healing that followed. In a heartbeat, I said, because you're my son, and I'd burn down the world to keep you safe. 1 year after the wedding that never happened, Daniel brought Rebecca to Sunday dinner. She was everything Victoria wasn't, genuine, transparent, comfortable in her own skin. She had a full life with verifiable friends, a family who adored her, and a presence that didn't require performance. Rebecca, I said as we cleared the dinner dishes, I have a confession. Oh no. Should I be worried? I ran a very thorough background check on you. She laughed. I know. Daniel told me. I would have done the same thing. You're not angry? Mrs. Hartwell, I'm a kindergarten teacher who went through a very public, very messy divorce 3 years ago because my ex-husband was hiding a gambling addiction. I understand the importance of protecting the people you love, even when they don't want to be protected. Especially then. We became friends that night, Rebecca and I. Not the manufactured friendship Victoria had tried to sell me, but something real built on mutual respect and shared understanding of what it means to love someone through their worst decisions. 2 years after the wedding that never happened, Daniel proposed to Rebecca. The engagement lasted 14 months. The wedding was small, intimate, held in my backyard with 50 guests and homemade food. Rebecca wore a simple dress that cost $300. The flowers came from a local farmer's market. It was perfect. As I watched Daniel and Rebecca exchange vows, I thought about Victoria, serving year 4 of her 15-year sentence. I thought about the other men she'd conned, the families she'd destroyed, the trust she'd shattered. I thought about the version of this day that almost happened, where my son married a predator and lost everything. And I thought about the choice I'd made to be the villain in a story long enough for him to see the truth. After the ceremony, Daniel pulled me aside. Mom, thank you. For what? For loving me enough to let me hate you. For being strong enough to do the right thing even when it cost you everything. For teaching me that protection sometimes looks like destruction. I held my son's hand and watched his wife, his real wife, laugh with her sister across the garden. That's what mothers do, I said. We show up. We fight. We protect. Even when it means being the monster in someone else's story. You were never the monster, Mom. You were the hero. It just took me a while to see it. So let me ask you something, because this is the question that matters. If you knew the person your child loved was going to destroy them, but warning them would drive them away, what would you do? Would you stay silent to keep the peace? Would you speak up and risk losing them? Or would you burn down their entire world to save them from themselves? Because here's what I learned, love isn't always kind. Sometimes it's fierce. Sometimes it's brutal. Sometimes it requires you to be hated for doing the right thing. But it's always, always worth it. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to save someone from themselves? Have you ever been the one who needed saving but couldn't see it? Drop your story in the comments below. Let's talk about the fine line between protection and control, about trust and verification, about loving someone enough to let them be angry at you. And if you found yourself in my shoes, if you discovered your child was being targeted by a predator, what would you do differently? Would you confront them privately? Would you go public like I did? Or would you find a third path I never considered? Share your thoughts, your stories, your wisdom. Because we're all just trying to navigate the impossible balance between letting the people we love make their own choices and protecting them from choices that will destroy them. Hit that like button if this story made you think. Subscribe if you want more stories about the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of protecting the people we love. And share this with someone who needs to hear that sometimes being right means being alone for a while, but it doesn't mean being wrong. Until next time, remember, the people who love you the most are often the ones willing to be hated for saving you. Don't confuse their protection for control. And if you're the one doing the protecting, don't confuse their anger for a lack of love. Family is complicated. Truth is hard. But both are worth fighting for. See you in the next story.